The point of this morning's session is to see if we can cover some of these points. We want to recognise that all behaviour communicates a message and that there's always an underlying cause for the behaviours we see. We want to become aware of some of the positive behaviour management strategies we could use in our environment, whether that's the breakfast club in the hall or playground. We want to recognise that our behaviour as adults can prevent or encourage an escalation in behaviour, and we want to become aware of strategies to help repair relationships and help the child learn new skills for next time. All challenging behaviour is communication. And the tricky part of our job as an adult in school is trying to work out what the message is. What message is the child trying to give us? Martin Herbert is a child psychologist from way back in the 80s, and he said, children are trying to solve problems, they just don't have the skills to do it as appropriately as we'd like them to yet. They will get there eventually. That learning of new skills will develop over time. So how can we make it worth their while to develop their better communication skills? We need to understand the whole picture. You might be familiar with the iceberg model, where most of it's hidden underneath. The behaviour we see on the surface, so the shouting or the stealing or the violence or the annoying or hurtful behaviours and everything in between, all of that is happening for a reason. And we may or may not be aware of the underlying reason. It could be the same things that affect you or I or all children, or it could be specific to individuals. So what could these reasons be? Usually in the in-person training, we'd get a host of reasons from the audience, but I think we'll just highlight a few just now. Things like tiredness and hunger or thirst are could be reasons for children not being on form. Boredom, insecurity. They've just had an argument with their mum before being dropped off at breakfast club. Maybe they're worried about what mum's going back home, an argument with dad, for example, or if mum's threatened to take away the Xbox, what's going to happen once a child's dropped off at school. Maybe they're worried about what's coming after lunch. So there could be a whole load of underlying reasons. It could be really obvious reasons, or maybe we'll never know. But trying to understand the underlying reasons will help us when trying to understand the communication. Conflict spiral. This is a useful model for when we're trying to understand the underlying behaviour. Having a basic understanding of this conflict spiral can help us think what the child needs and also help develop a planned response to their behaviour. This behaviour can become problematic if there are reactions to it develop into big incidents or conflicts. If we go down to the bottom here, experiences shape feelings which drive the behaviour. So if we work backwards from behaviour, what might this child have been feeling in order that he behaved in that way? And what experiences might he have had to make him feel that way? So if we think about behaviour we might come across in the playground or in the classroom, some really controlling behaviour, for example, from a child who needs to control every aspect of his time. Maybe he feels unsafe unless he is in control because his experience is that adults are unreliable or inconsistent. And so with that hypothesis, we can consider what replacement experiences might help shape more positive feelings, which might help drive more appropriate behaviour. And it's these discussions and plans that will be made in conjunction with those people who know the child best. So the parents, the teachers, and other key adults that know the child really well. That's a conflict spiral. As the adult in an unsettled situation, we can have a big influence on how an incident plays out by managing the mood. Our impact will also contribute to the bank of experiences the child has of negative experiences and whether they end up spiralling out of control or are able to be resolved. So I've got a short video clip here just explaining mood management. We know that our experiences directly impact on how we feel, and it's our feelings that drive our behaviour, and it's our behaviour that elicits responses in others. And these responses have a direct effect again on our experiences. And so the cycle continues. What's important to understand here is that by changing one aspect of this cycle, we impact on all of the others. So a positive intervention at any point in the cycle will hopefully have a positive outcome on all of the other aspects. But similarly, something negative during the cycle will have a negative knock-on. So if a child is experiencing feelings of frustration or anxiety, we may see an increase in distressed behaviour.
By responding to the behaviour in an empathetic and supportive way, and in a way that we know works for that young person, that uses strategies to de-escalate and calm the situation, we are hopefully doing two things. Firstly, we are hopefully providing some support to calm and de-stress the young person, but also we're providing the young person with a new experience that says, when I'm finding things difficult, the adults have got me, they understand what I need. They are providing me with clear and supportive boundaries that will influence the rest of the cycle.
Some of you might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a theory of psychology explaining human motivation based on the pursuit of different levels of need. The theory states that humans are motivated to fulfill their needs in a hierarchical order, beginning with the most basic needs before moving on to more advanced needs. And the ultimate goal, according to the theory, is to reach the fifth level of hierarchy, the self-actualization, becoming the best we can be. So those children who are not having their most important basic needs met, they might be coming to school hungry, or they haven't had enough sleep, or they're missing physical or emotional interaction with their caregivers. They're not going to be motivated to be sociable or to put effort into following rules or learning new skills. So a lot of work will have been done in school around ways we can support all children to have their basic needs met, and maybe some of that information comes down to you guys through their behaviour plan. So if we look at the physiological needs, these are the most essential things a person needs to survive. They include the need for shelter and water and food and warmth and rest and health. And a person's motivation at this level derives from their instinct to survive. It goes right back to there. Only if these physiological needs are being met will a child be motivated to have the next level, the safety needs, met. So on the second level, safety needs or security needs relate to a person's need to feel safe and secure in their life and surroundings, their environment. Motivation comes from the need for law and order and protection from unpredictable and dangerous conditions. And only if these needs are being met will a child be motivated to have the needs above that, the social needs, met. The third layer, the love and belonging needs. Humans are social creatures that crave interactions with others. So this level of the hierarchy outlines the need for friendship and intimacy and family and love. Humans have the need to give and receive love, to feel like they belong in a group. When deprived of these needs, individuals may experience loneliness or depression. And remember, unless the physiological and safety needs below are being met, the child won't be motivated to achieve this level anyway. The level above that, esteem needs. So if everything below is being met, the child may be motivated to have his esteem needs met. And the level above that, the self-actualization needs, that can be different for everyone, but it can be generalized as the pursuit of personal growth. This next screen comes from a planning sheet I use with schools sometimes around meeting unmet needs in their setting. And you can see here it breaks the needs down. You can see here that the possible outcome of not having physiological needs met, they come to school without adequate sleep or without having their breakfast. Not only might they be tired and grumpy and have difficulty concentrating on that day, but they won't be motivated to keep the rules, or maybe they'll be challenging authority because their needs here aren't being met, so they're not going to be motivated to work on these. Someone who doesn't feel cared for or doesn't feel special might have behaviour that looks like attention seeking, for example. And children invariably select the easiest way to get attention, whether that be positive or negative attention, that doesn't matter. Okay, stages of a crisis. You can have a really good shared understanding of a child and you can follow the plan, you can be on your best form, but sometimes with some children there will be conflict. So stages of a crisis. And if we graphed the conflict, the crisis, this is what it might look like. So along the bottom is the baseline. This is the baseline level of emotional arousal. And some people might have higher or lower baseline levels than others. The first phase is a trigger phase. Something happens, or it's imagined that it happens. Someone takes his football where he thinks people are laughing at him, for example. Now, if he can't manage the emotions that this stirs up, then he might become more emotionally aroused during this escalation phase, the second phase. And during this phase, we might be able to spot, as adults in the room, what's happening and support him in the way that we know he responds best to. So whether that's by using humour or distraction, empathy, or whatever we know works well for him because it's in his behaviour plan. But if we're unable to stop this escalation, he'll reach crisis phase. And this is when strong feelings like anger and fear come to the fore and trigger the fight, flight, freeze response. And this goes right back to the primitive brain, where when faced with danger such as being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, early humans would have three choices. They could fight it, run away from it, or play dead. And all we can do, as adults in the room at this point, is keep him and everybody else safe and apply the strategies that are in his behaviour plan. Once he's hit crisis point and he's started to calm down, there could be further escalations on the way. But once he's gone right back down to his baseline level, he'll dip below it in the depression phase. He might present as quiet or tearful or just want to hide, whether that's on the surface or inside as well. But it's not until he's out of the depression phase and back to baseline that we can really connect with him and talk about what's happened. There's a difference between ready to go back to class and being ready to apologise. And often, in this depression phase, children are able and willing to get back with their peers, but they're just not in an emotionally stable place to be able to apologise. It needs to come at some point. The trouble we have in school is that there's so many people on differing levels of baseline. For instance, the child that you say never has a trigger, he just goes off in one. He sounds typical of someone that has a baseline of up here. When he comes into school, that's where he's at for whatever reason. It's really important to be aware that the adult responsible for this child in red, who's on this red journey, will very likely be following their path very closely. So that's what this blue line represents. So the child is escalating their behaviour, and the adult who's responsible for them is following them very, very closely on that curve. So Dan Siegel is a psychiatrist, and he describes this crisis point as lid flipping. You might have heard of the phrase, he's flipped his lid. Well, Dan explains it briefly using the hand model of the brain.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So when we see a child struggling, escalating, heading towards crisis point, or about to flip their lid, as we've just heard, we as the adults need to be able to manage ourselves so that we can best support the child. To manage our own emotions most effectively, it helps if we've got a good self-awareness about what kinds of experiences trigger us. What's our triggers? What do we come across that stirs strong feelings in us? So from annoyance and sadness to hate and fear. But it's also really important to be aware of what pushes the children's buttons. What are their triggers? Now, this information will be in their behaviour plans, and key information from this document will help you support each child in the right way at the right time. They will push your buttons. When you feel your buttons being pushed, keep solid, keep positive, keep in control, keep focused. They will test you and they want you to pass. The test is that they want you to be confident enough to be the adult in charge. They need to feel safe and secure around you. Beacon House provide a range of assessments and therapies for children who are experiencing mental health difficulties, emotional and behavioural problems, relationship difficulties and all that sort of thing stemming from early developmental loss. So this next clip is an animation that they've produced to illustrate how a traumatised child swings from fight and flight to freeze and collapse, and what we as adults in school can do to help bring that child back into their window of tolerance so that they can be at their personal best. The clip also illustrates why maybe sometimes children can do something one day, like follow instructions or be a really good friend to somebody, but not the next. And it highlights that it's our job as adults to help them expand their window of tolerance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. One of the things that they illustrated was how important it is for us as the adults. One of the things we can do is to notice their emotions and help them to notice it themselves and communicate it and manage it. They're more than likely going to need us to model that to start with. Teaching them this, it's not all done in the classroom. In fact, unstructured times like you guys have to manage can be great opportunities for practice. So you can try to make a connection by wondering aloud. I'm wondering if you're feeling angry because your face is like this and your body's like, and your words are really, describe what you're seeing and give them the language, the words to describe anger or anxious or worry. You might not get it right. You might get a positive or negative response or no response at all. Often it's, no, I'm not cross, go away. But that's okay. You can read the situation and either keep on guessing or try to engage through a distraction. You could relate to personal experience, real or made up, saying that when I'm cross, my face goes like that too. And this is what I feel like inside. And that will show them that strong feelings like anger or fear are survivable. They're tolerable. And they happen to other people as well, not just them. You could wonder what the trigger was. Wondering aloud's great. I saw what happened with him taking your ball, and I wondered whether that might make you cross. When that happens to me, I feel like this, and this is what I do to help. So giving them an appropriate model to attach to. And acknowledge to them, that must be really hard for you if you feel like that. You know yourself that if someone tells you to stop being silly or stop worrying about that, it doesn't really help. What you need, if you're worried about someone, is someone to attune to you, to empathise with how you actually are feeling, rather than saying, don't be silly. We heard Dan Siegel talking about name it to tame it. So this goes on the premise that giving something a label takes away the primitive fear factor, and it gives your brain a time to make a considered response. So rather than acting on impulse, name it to tame it. And catch it and match it is a very thriving response to big emotions. Oh my goodness, I can see you are so cross, and trying to match their level of emotion with your response to them. You probably get back, yes, I am really cross, and big emotion back, matching yours. And what the catch it and match it is all about is giving the big emotion and gradually bringing it back down. I thought so. Something really bad must have happened, and bringing it gradually down. That ball's really special to you, and I've seen you practice those skills really well with that ball. And right down to, what can we do? Shall we go and get it, or how can we fix it? So catch it and match it is about catching their emotional level and matching it, but you, as the adult, bringing it down gradually, and they will hopefully come back down with you. De-escalation strategies. You're never going to catch all the triggers, and nor would you want to. Children need to learn. But we do want to de-escalate before it becomes a crisis. So I'm going to run through some de-escalation strategies that may or may not work for different children on different days. You may or may not use some of these already, but we'll go through some of these just now. Giving choices. Some children just need to feel in control, and they know how to get that control. So let's give them a bit of control, but we stay in charge by controlling the options that they get. So the nice and nice approach provides two clear choices, both of which are yours, so that's okay. So it might be, okay, are you going to pick up the hoops first or put away your coat first? You choose. So both things we're wanting him to do, but he's getting some control of the situation. Are you going to line up with the rest of the class, or are you going to line up with me? We're achieving what we want, but he's getting to choose. He's getting some element of control. But often what happens is, I'm not going to do any of them, and then the hoops all go flying again. So that's when nice and nasty can be helpful. It's okay, you don't need to do it right now, I would say. But if you choose not to do what I'm asking you to do, then there will be a consequence. And then just walk away, give him that thinking time. You can't make him do it, but you can make it clear that there will be a consequence if he chooses not to. You need to follow the rules this lunchtime, or else you'll miss some of Nick's lunchtime, to make it clear what the consequence is. And give take-up time. I mentioned walking away. The power of walking away cannot be underestimated. You'll know that standing over someone, raising your voice, is less likely to achieve your goal than stating your expectation and walking away. And nor is it behaviour you'd want to model anyway. Remember, the rule is you need to be polite. I'm going to come back in a minute and see if you're ready to make a good choice. And just walk away and come back in a minute. Ear-shotting. Some children can't handle praise, so ear-shotting for them is a good strategy. You know, if you say, oh, you three boys are playing really nicely, and then they look at me and go, oh yeah, what about this game? And they'll try something different because they just can't handle that praise. But by saying, you know, oh, Mrs. B, have you seen the good choices these three boys are making? You're not talking directly at them. It takes away some of the edge off of that. Use of language. So the next set of de-escalation strategies is based on our use of language. So the never say no. Sometimes we have to say no, but no is often a trigger word for lots of children. Try not to say it. Yes, you can, as soon as she gets here. Yes, we're going to do it tomorrow when the whole class is back. Yes, you can stop when the girls are finished, so it's fair. So there's ways of not saying no, but you can when you need to. No, you can't use those for sword fighting. Similarly, don't say don't, because being positive in your instructions is always helpful. And if you tell a child not to do something, you're including in your instruction the thing that you don't want them to do. And sometimes that catches in their mind. That's sometimes the only thing they hear. So instead of saying don't run, you'd say walk. You know, walk through the classroom, thank you. Or remember to keep your lips closed until it's your turn to talk. Tell them what you want them to do. Saying please is polite, but it also infers a request that the child can refuse to comply with. So using thanks in the instruction gives an expectation of compliance. So join at the end of the line, thank you. Hoops to me, thank you. Or okay, stand in a straight line and look this way, thank you. That thank you, it gives an expectation of compliance. Using conditioner. So this is similar to not saying no. I use this one the most out of all these strategies. You know, when and then. When you've done this, then you can do that. It cuts out saying no. It tells them when they are going to be able to do the thing that they really want to do. When you've picked up the hoops, then you can go and play with your friends. Yes. When you've done what I've asked you to do, then you can go outside. Yes. Or when you show me you can play with Jimmy, then you can choose him as a partner. This next set is based on the attention we give the behaviour. So what you focus on, you get more of. If you focus on the negative behaviour, you'll get more of it. That's why we're encouraged to give a child 10 positive comments for every negative one, because then you're focusing on the positive. If all they're after is attention, then they'll do it the easiest way possible. And if it's easier for them to get attention from doing positive things, then that's what they're more likely to do. But trying to give positive attention to someone who is doing virtually nothing positive apart from breathing can be hard. And that's when you can use proximity praise to positively notice those children or adults around him who are making good choices. Oh, I'm really impressed with the way you're watching and listening. Oh, I love how you remember to put your hand up. And more often than not, if this way to get attention is easier than the less appropriate way, the child will catch on quickly. Right, tactical ignoring. It's a tricky one, this one, because what I've got in the back of my mind is if you ignore the whispers, you get the shouts. But if a child's doing negative behaviour purely for attention, picking him up on these behaviours will reinforce that strategy as a good way for him to get attention. What we need to do in this case is ignore the low-level attention-seeking behaviour, but very quickly get in and give attention for something positive. Anything, you know, your shoes are on the right feet, you're in the right place. Whatever it is that you want to see more of, you know, do it. You know, make it up. Make it up if you need to, but it's got to be plausible. They've got to believe that you're liking what you're seeing. The bogus note. Well, the fake note. You want to use this bogus note to quickly take the child away from the trigger. So whether that's somebody in the class who you can see is winding them up and something's going to happen very, very soon if you're not quick, or you can see something building slowly in the playground, you can use a bogus note. Now, you can't use it too much normally, and in COVID times, I'm not sure what the rule would be about sending children, but it's all about saying, oh, just the right person, can you take this really important note to Mrs. B for me, please, and wait till she opens it and come back and tell me what she says. Calling the cavalry, right? Sometimes you'll need to call the class teacher or SLT for support. Often, and I include myself in this in the past, often adults get annoyed when this child who's been causing havoc in class or in the playground gets taken away to do something nice like Lego with this important person who's much nicer than you anyway. The Lego might be all you see or hear, But it's important for all adults to see the difference between Lego as a reward and Lego as a calming activity. So Lego as a calming activity helps the child get back down to his baseline level and able to access his thinking brain again. The adult who stepped in will judge the right time to address the incident, what's happened. A consequence will only be effective once the child. And then afterwards, after an incident, it's really important that all big incidents are followed through with debrief. It might be you who does it, and that's the best option because it shows the child that you're not pushing them onto someone else. It shows them that you can manage their behaviour and that you want to help them make better choices next time. It might not always be possible, though, for you in your role to do it with them. Bearing in mind that what we saw earlier about waiting till they're past the depression phase before we can really connect and talk about what's happened. And that can take an hour or longer sometimes. Where it's possible, use a visual, because that way you're depersonalising it. It's not you that's having a go at them for what's happened. They're getting the same consistent experience from everyone. Also, with nothing visual, it's just words, and that one-on-one conversation can be quite intimidating. And also, with no visuals, there's that awkward eye contact sometimes. So use a visual, and it cuts out the need for the uncomfortable eye contact. So this debrief form that I use, and I know lots of schools have used it, are using it. It's got 6 sections, which might seem a bit overkill, but I think it's a good process to go through. So in the first section, the child would describe what's happened, and the adult would describe very briefly, and then the child points to what they did, and then they tick if it was okay or not okay. And then the child points to how they felt before they did the behaviour. Then they say why they did it and how they felt after doing it. Then the child can say how others might have felt, and they might need some help with this. So you could say to them, if it was me who'd got hurt, or if it was me who'd seen someone shouting their head off, I might feel a bit scared. And again, this help that you're giving them here is going to be developing that emotional literacy, that the language around how they're feeling, and you're linking it in that moment to how they were feeling in that moment. And then the last section is coming up with a plan together for next time. I'll try to use my words, or I'll tell a teacher, for example. And the good thing about this as a written record, you can sit down with them next time and say, yeah, you said you'd tell a teacher last time and you didn't, you just hit out again. But at that point, you can say, wait, maybe it's too hard to tell a teacher. Maybe it might be too hard. Maybe he can't use his words. He's too highly aroused to be able to use his thinking brain and his words properly. So maybe his plan is to show the teacher a red card or a help card, showing that he needs some help, but he just can't use his words. So that's brought us to the end, in time for any questions. Now, it's been a bit of a pin back your ears and listen kind of experience without much opportunity for interaction. So maybe once you've had time to digest everything, if you have any questions, then feed them to me either through my email here or via your head teacher. I'd like to finish up though with a short video clip illustrating the value and importance of human connection, relationships. So Rita Pearson, she talks from a teacher's perspective, but it equally applies to all adults in school. The role that you play in school is pivotal in not just keeping the children safe during their lunch hour or developing their play and social skills. You're giving the children regular experience of a consistent adult, an opportunity for them to make one more positive connection in school. A massive factor in any of the strategies you use to support children to make good choices is the quality of connection you have with them. So we're going to listen to Rita to finish.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class. Because I am the best teacher and you are the best students, they put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.